Shanghai's food delivery industry has grown remarkably over the past few years, making Shanghai home to one of the busiest food delivery scenes in the world. The convenience and affordability of food delivery means that it is no longer out of reach for the everyday consumer. For restaurants and restaurant owners, food delivery is also a crucial part of adapting to the fast-changing and competitive food industry. But just how sustainable is this growing industry? And how much does it really cost to get food delivered in Shanghai? Every time someone orders food for delivery, they are responsible for the creation of superfluous and unnecessary waste. This superfluous, unnecessary waste takes the form of plastic takeout containers, as well as plastic cutlery. At the end of every meal, most of these containers end up in a bin somewhere, out of sight and out of mind. Since I was first introduced to the world of ulama and Sherpas, I had always been curious as to where these containers would eventually end up. Would they be reused? Would they be recycled? Would they be left to degrade over hundreds of years in a landfill? Would they be incinerated? Would they just be dumped in some waterway somewhere, shipped off to some foreign country, or left in the middle of the ocean? Something which had also concerned me was the knowledge that plastic, which is typically a synthetic product made from petrochemicals, does not actually decompose the same way as other types of organic material. Biodegradable plastics, which is often considered the better alternative for the planet, is also only capable of breaking down into smaller pieces of microplastics. This recognition inspired me to explore the following question for my Summer Dearth project. At the end of their life cycle in Shanghai, where do takeout containers end up? And what environmental challenges do they present? As consumers, it is important for us to be fully conscious of these issues, as well as the implications of our everyday choices. That way, we're able to more accurately weigh up the real cost of our food, so that we can make better choices with how we spend our money. To explore this question, I spent the first half of my summer reading and taking notes from existing materials. I found that it was very difficult to find China-specific information about their recycling process, whereas countries like the United States or New Zealand, this whole process is overall a lot more transparent. I'd emailed Professor Lee about this, and he told me that currently there is no existing information about China's recycling process and data, which is why additional research, especially fieldwork, is so important. So the second half of my summer was spent doing actual fieldwork in Shanghai. I spent 2 days in a trash truck documenting the route it takes to get to Shanghai's incinerators and landfills from NYU Shanghai. Before I'd started on my project, I'd had a lot of preconceived notions as to, how Shanghai recycled. I'd always seen, for example, the older woman or older men who would walk down into the little communities where people live, the xiaoqus. I'd seen them, take out the recyclable water bottles. I'd seen people driving around their little carts full of cardboard which had been squashed, and I assumed that the city did recycle, but I also did know that it appeared as though a lot of individuals were kind of doing were the backbone of the recycling industry. And after experiencing what I had, of course what I saw and what I experienced was very specific to the route I was taken on. We were only in Lujiazui, so that is by no means, a good representation of the entire Pudong, nor is it a great representation of Shanghai as a whole. But at least in Lujiazui, I was able to get a sense of how people recycled, how the city or how the area recycled. And in the end, it did appear as though the individuals I was talking about earlier, that they are truly the backbone of the recycling industry for this whole part of Shanghai. Right now, what happens with recycling is if it gets recycled, it gets recycled. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. And for the most part, it probably doesn't. That's the same as people who pick the trash out from the public bins down the street. If they manage to find something in there, because by chance you threw something in there, they came by after you, and then they picked it out before the trash was collected, then sure, that bottle might get recycled. But if they first come by the bin and you hadn't thrown your bottle in there, there's nothing recycled, then he might just walk on, you'll throw your bottle in the bin, and he or she might never ever be able to pick that up, and then that just will go to a landfill or get incinerated. Right now the process just seems like it requires a lot of chance, and for such a big city that produces so much waste, it just does not appear to be the most practical way of doing things. When I was in the rubbish truck with the drivers, I was actually able to see how people who are part of a company rather than individuals, how they actually recycle. There were only 2 people working for such a huge office building. They were sorting trash. I could see the trash being sorted, but when our truck came, you know, they were just in such a rush to because there was such a mess, and they would get new trash as well the next day, and so they kind of were somewhat picking at what they wanted. The larger pieces for sure, the large pieces of cardboard, the noticeable big pieces of plastic bottles, anything with food they just completely disregard. It's just not worth recycling. In the end, they kind of just like pushed everything together and just got the truck to get rid of everything else that they hadn't picked out. So I think out of maybe there were 10 bins which had recyclable things in it, but they weren't already sorted, they probably picked out maybe 1 bin worth of recyclable things, and the rest just were all taken away. They were all you know, they just all ended up in the truck, and then that truck went to the incinerator.